Poles have been stockpiling the same 20 foods for over 1,000 years. Most of them cost almost nothing. All of them are still being made in Polish kitchens today, and some of them literally never expire. These are foods that survived partitions, occupations, 2 world wars, and 45 years of communist rationing. When the shelves in Poland were empty, these were what was in the cellars. When the shelves were full again, Poles kept making them anyway. Here's what you're going to learn in the next 20 minutes. Number 7 is a recipe baked the same way since 1380, older than most countries. Number 3 is the only stew in Europe that famously gets better the longer it sits. And number 1, Polish kings stocked it by the barrel. Bottles over a century old are still being opened today. If you've never heard of any of this, hit subscribe right now. This channel works through one food culture at a time, and the next pantry is coming next week. Grab a pen. Let's go. 20. Beet and horseradish relish, kwikla. Kwikla is a brick red relish of grated cooked beets and fresh horseradish. It's been on Polish Easter tables since the 1500s, when the szlachta, Poland's nobility, served it alongside roasted ham and smoked sausage. Every Polish family has its own version. The recipe is barely a recipe. Boiled beets get grated fine and mixed with fresh horseradish, salt, sugar, and a splash of vinegar. The mixture is packed into sterilized jars while warm and sealed. Vinegar acidity blocks bacteria, while horseradish contains allyl isothiocyanate, a natural antimicrobial powerful enough to kill most microbes on contact. Sealed jars keep in a cool pantry for many months without refrigeration. It is best to make it the day before you serve it, as the horseradish heat mellows overnight. Sharp the first day, perfect the next. Number 19 is older, bubbling in Polish cellars for over 500 years. 19. Fermented beets, buraczki kiszone. Long before borscht became famous abroad, Polish villages were fermenting beets in giant wooden barrels. The product is kwas buraczany, beet sour, the actual base of red barszcz, the deep crimson Christmas Eve soup. This is a medieval recipe still in use today. Peeled beets go into jars with garlic, bay leaf, allspice, and salt. Cold water covers them and the lid is left loose. 5 to 10 days at room temperature later, the liquid turns deep ruby and faintly sour from the lactic acid bacteria at work. The acid kills harmful microbes and the salt blocks spoilage. Stored cold, the brine and beets keep for several months. When you strain it, save the brine separately because that is your real soup base. The beets themselves are just a bonus. Coming up next, a preserve so delicate it fills the most famous pastry in Poland. 18. Rose petal preserve, konfitura z rozy. This one is pure Polish luxury. Konfitura z rozy is a slow-cooked jam made from wild damask rose petals, sugar, and lemon juice. It's the traditional filling of paczki, the legendary Polish donuts eaten on tłusty czwartek every February. Tens of millions of paczki get eaten that day, and most of them are filled with this. The petals are picked at dawn, their white bases are trimmed, and they are pounded in a stone mortar with sugar until the oils release. Lemon juice is added for color before the mix is cooked slow and sealed hot in glass jars. The sugar content is brutal, often equal weight to the petals, which creates an osmotic environment where microbes cannot survive. Sealed jars last 2 to 3 years. Be sure to use only damask roses, as anything else, including grocery store hybrids, will give you a soapy taste you cannot fix. Number 17 smells like Polish autumn, smoke, plums, and something deeper than either. 17. Smoked dried plums, Suska Seklanska. Suska Seklanska earned EU PGI protection in 2010, recognizing a tradition the villages around Sekna have practiced for over 100 years. The result is unlike any other dried fruit on earth. It is deep mahogany, intensely smoky, and almost meaty. Late-season Węgierka plums get halved, pitted, and laid on wooden grates above slow-burning alder for several days. The water content drops from 60% down to 20%. The wood smoke deposits antimicrobial phenols on the surface, while the drying removes the necessary moisture. Stored in cloth bags, the plums keep for many months without spoiling. You can soak them in warm water for 20 minutes before cooking to plump them back up, which releases a smoky liquid you can pour over pork or duck as a glaze. Open a Polish home on Christmas Eve, and you'll find the next one on every single table. 16. Pickled wild mushrooms, Marinowane grzyby. Marinowane grzyby are one of the 12 traditional dishes of Wigilia, the Polish Christmas Eve feast. The tradition goes back to medieval Polish kitchens, when forest mushrooms were the only meatless protein that could survive a winter. Young porcini, butter mushrooms, and small bay bullets get cleaned without water, briefly boiled, then packed into jars with peppercorns, mustard seed, bay leaf, and onion. A hot vinegar marinade goes over them before they are sealed immediately. The vinegar acidity blocks bacteria, and the boiling kills initial microbes, allowing sealed jars to keep easily for 1 to 2 years. Smaller mushrooms hold their crunch better, so skip anything bigger than your thumb as they turn mushy in the marinade and ruin the whole jar. Same forest, same mushroom. Completely different preservation. And that's number 15. 15. Dried wild mushrooms, Suszone grzyby. Poland is one of the great mushroom foraging cultures in Europe. Mushroom picking has its own word in Polish, grzybobranie, and it's treated as a national pastime. From late summer through October, families head into the forests of Mazury, Podlasie, and the Carpathians with baskets, returning with porcini, parasol mushrooms, chanterelles, and bay bullets. What can't be eaten or pickled gets dried. The mushrooms are cleaned without water, sliced thick and threaded onto cotton strings or laid out on wooden trays. They hang in warm attics, above tiled stoves, or strung across rooms over several days. As the moisture evaporates, the flavor concentrates into something almost meaty. With the water gone, mold cannot grow. Stored in glass jars or cloth bags in a dry pantry, dried mushrooms keep their flavor for 2 to 3 years. Always save the soaking water when you rehydrate them, as that is pure mushroom stock that you should never throw out. We're a third of the way in. Coming up at number 8, the only food on this list that's literally alive in Polish kitchens right now. Stay with me. Now we leave the lowlands and head into the Tatra Mountains. 14. Smoked Tatra sheep cheese, Oskipek. This one carries UNESCO recognition. Oskipek is a hard, smoked sheep's milk cheese made only in the Tatra Mountains by Highland shepherds called Bakawi. It is a 400-year tradition that has enjoyed EU PDO protection since 2008, and the shepherding system that produces it sits on UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage list. Sheep's milk gets curdled with rennet and pressed into wooden molds carved with traditional patterns. It is brined for up to 24 hours, then hung in a wooden mountain hut called a bakoka, and slow smoked over a smoldering fire for around 2 weeks. Brining, drying, and smoke create 3 forces that result in a cheese with low moisture and an antimicrobial smoke-cured exterior. Properly stored, Oskipek keeps for several months without refrigeration. You can grill it on a dry pan for 30 seconds aside so the crust seals in the flavor and the inside softens just enough to serve with cranberry preserve. Smell a Polish town in November and you'll know what's coming next. 13. Smoked cured pork loin, Polidwika wedzona. Polidwika wedzona is a pork loin salt-cured, spiced, and slowly cold-smoked over fruit wood for several days. The technique has been passed down by Polish butchers since the 17th century, when smoking houses became standard in Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth towns. Whole pork loins get rubbed with salt, sugar, garlic, juniper berries, and black pepper, then cured for several days in a cold room. They are hung in a cold smokehouse over smoldering apple, cherry, or alder wood for 2 to 4 days. The salt curing draws moisture out while the smoke deposits antimicrobial compounds. Properly made, a polidwika hangs at room temperature for many weeks, or in the refrigerator for months. Slice it cold and paper thin because warm meat tears and you lose the texture that makes this worth eating. Number 12 is going to test you. It's made from the parts most cuisines throw away. 12. Polish head cheese, salsicon. Salsicon is exactly what it sounds like. Pieces of pig's head, tongue, and other cuts are simmered slowly with spices and packed into a natural casing. The gelatin sets it into a sliceable, intensely savory loaf that has been a Polish butcher tradition since the Middle Ages, often carried by soldiers on long campaigns. The head meat simmers for hours with bay leaf, marjoram, allspice, and salt, before being chopped fine, mixed with broth, and packed tightly into pork stomachs or beef bladders. As it cools, the natural gelatin sets and binds everything together. This combination of salt, slow cooking, and an airtight casing keeps it safe in the refrigerator for several weeks. Eat it the day you slice it, because once cut, the gelatin starts releasing water and the texture drops fast. If you've ever met a Pole traveling abroad, you've probably been offered the next one. 11. Polish snack sausage, kabanosy. Kabanosy are long, thin, dark, dry-cured sausages made from pork, smoked and air-dried until they shrink to a fingertip's thickness. The recipe dates to the early 1900s, when Polish butchers needed a sausage that travelers could carry without refrigeration for days. In 2011, the EU granted them traditional specialty guaranteed protection, meaning only sausages made the traditional Polish way can legally use the name. Lean pork gets coarsely ground with salt, black pepper, caraway, and sugar before being stuffed into thin sheep casings. They are dried briefly, hot smoked over alder or beech, and then air-dried until they lose around 40% of their weight. Smoke deposits antimicrobial compounds, and the severe moisture loss makes them inhospitable to bacteria. Kabanosy keep at room temperature for many weeks, and even longer when sealed. Hang them in a cool, dry spot instead of the fridge, as cold air dries them out incorrectly and turns them hard instead of snappy. Halfway through, 20 foods. Real Polish history. Coming up at number 3, the legendary stew Polish poets wrote about. At number 1, the drink Polish kings aged for decades. Stay with me. Top 10 now. 10. Pork lard with cracklings, smalec ze skwarkami. Most cuisines throw lard out, but Poles turned it into the national bread spread. Order a beer at a Polish village inn, and this is exactly what they bring you with the bread. Pork back fat and belly get cubed and slowly heated for hours. As the fat melts, the meat bits brown into golden, crispy skwarki, Polish cracklings. The clear fat is strained, mixed back with the cracklings, salt, and marjoram, then poured warm into ceramic crocks to set. Rendering removes the water and proteins that bacteria need to survive, leaving a pure fat that is completely shelf-stable. Smalec keeps for many months in a cool pantry, and even longer when refrigerated. Spread it on toasted rye rather than soft bread, so you get the proper crunch, and add raw garlic and a pinch of salt on top. Number 9 has a stranger backstory than any food on this list so far. 9. Plum butter, powidła sliwkowe. Powidła sliwkowe was perfected by Cistercian monks in southern Poland in the 13th century. Polish kings sent diplomats to their monasteries specifically to bring it back. That's how good it is. Late-season Wajurka plums get pitted and slowly cooked in copper kettles for up to 72 hours, stirred constantly with wooden paddles. As the plums break down, their natural sugars caramelize and water evaporates. No sugar is added because the plums sweeten themselves into a paste so dense it can be cut with a knife. This causes water levels to drop low and natural sugars to climb high, meaning bacteria cannot survive in either extreme. Sealed in glass jars, powidła keeps for 2 to 3 years. Use it as a filling for any premium pastry like paczki, naleśniki, or chocolate shortbread, as it is much stronger than any commercial jam. Number 8 is alive. I mean that literally. 8. Sour rye starter, zakwas Zurek. This one is alive. Zakwas Zurek is a fermented rye flour starter that serves as the base of Zurek, the iconic Polish sour rye soup eaten at Easter and through every Polish winter. The finished soup is served traditionally with white sausage, hard-boiled egg, and potatoes, sometimes inside a hollowed-out bread bowl. Polish grandmothers have kept these starters alive for generations. Rye flour and warm water, sometimes with garlic, bay leaf, and allspice, sit in a sealed jar at room temperature for 3 to 5 days. Wild lactic acid bacteria wake up and ferment the mixture into something sour, slightly fizzy, and tan. The resulting lactic acid creates an environment harmful bacteria cannot tolerate. Refrigerated, the starter keeps for months, and if you feed it weekly with a tablespoon of rye flour and a splash of water, it will last indefinitely. Treat it like a pet because it can easily outlive you. And this is the recipe I told you about at the start. 7. Torun gingerbread, pierniki toruńskie. Pierniki toruńskie have been baked in the same Polish city since 1380. The recipe hospital predates the discovery of America by over 100 years, and it is still being baked exactly the same way today. Wheat or rye flour gets mixed with hot honey, lard, eggs, and a heady blend of cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, cardamom, ginger, and allspice. Then the dough is aged in a sealed clay crock for weeks, sometimes months, or even a full year. Only after aging is it rolled out, stamped into traditional shapes, and baked. The honey content is high and the water activity is low, while spices like cloves and cinnamon act as natural antimicrobials. Sealed in tin boxes, pierniki keep for many months, and connoisseurs say they only improve with time. Just be sure not to eat them fresh from the oven. Let them sit 2 or 3 days in a tin to soften up first, from one barrel tradition to the most important one in Polish history. 6. Fermented cabbage, kapusta czona. This is the heart of the Polish kitchen. When autumn ends in Poland, families gather to shred, salt, and pack cabbage into giant wooden barrels to make Polish sauerkraut. For centuries, it has been the food that bridged Polish families from autumn to spring. White cabbage gets shredded thin and mixed with coarse salt, sometimes layered with grated carrots, caraway seed, and apple. It is packed tightly and weighted with a heavy stone. Within days, wild lactic acid bacteria begin fermenting the sugars. The resulting acid kills harmful microbes and the salt prevents spoilage. Fermentation actually increases the vitamin C content, which is why Polish families historically survived winter without scurvy. Kept cool, fermented cabbage lasts 6 to 8 months. Once you open the jar, keep the cabbage submerged under the brine to make it last another 6 months in the fridge. You should also save that brine, as it is the traditional hangover cure across all of Eastern Europe. Same brine science, different vegetable, and equally essential. 5. Salt-brined cucumbers, ogórki kiszone. Ogórki kiszone are brine-fermented cucumbers. They are never vinegar pickled, only salt and thyme. The tradition stretches back to the medieval Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and every Polish village has its own jealously guarded recipe. Small fresh cucumbers get packed tightly into glass jars or oak barrels with dill flowers, garlic, horseradish leaves, blackcurrant leaves, and bay leaf. A cold salt brine of about 5% salinity covers them before the jar is sealed. Wild lactic acid bacteria take over. The salt blocks harmful microbes, and tannins from the leaves keep the cucumbers crunchy. Sealed in cool cellars, jars keep for a year or more. Do not open the jar with a metal utensil. Use wood or plastic instead, because metal can disrupt the brine chemistry and ruin the remaining fermentation. Number 4 has been hanging in Krakow butcher windows since the 1500s. 4. Krakow dry-cured sausage, kielbasa krakowska sucha. The recipe traces to the 16th century, when Krakow's butcher guilds, the Masarze, were officially regulated by the city. This represents 500 years of using the exact same method. Lean beef and pork get coarsely chopped with salt, garlic, pepper, and caraway, then stuffed into beef casings. They are air-dried briefly, cold smoked over alder or beech for several days, and then hung in ventilated rooms for weeks until they lose around 40% of their weight. With most water gone and salt high, bacteria cannot survive. Sliced thin, it shows a deep ruby color flecked with white fat. Properly made, krakowska sucha keeps at room temperature for many months. Slice off only what you need and wrap the rest in a clean cloth rather than plastic, because plastic suffocates the cure and causes the sausage to spoil. And now, the legendary stew I promised you. Top 3. The foods every Polish family fights to make the way Grandma did. Pay attention. 3. Hunter's stew, bigos. Bigos is the only stew in Europe that famously improves every time you reheat it. It features fermented cabbage, fresh cabbage, multiple meats, smoked sausage, dried mushrooms, and prunes. The tradition goes back to medieval Polish hunting parties, where nobles simmered it for days at hunting lodges. Adam Mickiewicz, Poland's national poet, even devoted a famous passage to it in his epic poem Pan Tadeusz. The science is real. Slow cooking breaks down all the meats. The fermented cabbage provides preserving lactic acid, and the high-fat content from the sausage and pork shields the surface. Properly made bigos can be safely reheated for 1 to 2 weeks. Polish families historically kept it in barrels outside in winter, letting it freeze between meals. Don't eat it the day you make it. Day 3 or 4 is the absolute peak. Reheat it slowly on low heat and never use a microwave. Number 2 might be the most famous Polish export of all time. 2. Polish vodka, Polska wodka. Polska wodka is so distinctly Polish the EU legally protects who can use the name. It must be made only from traditional Polish grains, rye, wheat, barley, oats, triticale, or potatoes, all grown and distilled within Poland. The first written records of Polish distillation date to the 1400s, and by the 16th century, Polish vodka was being exported across the Baltic to royal courts. The grain is mashed, fermented with yeast, distilled multiple times for purity, filtered through charcoal, and bottled at around 40% alcohol. At 40% or above, no microorganism can survive. Sealed in glass and stored away from light and heat, vodka maintains its quality essentially forever. Documented bottles from the 19th century are still completely drinkable today. Be sure to store the bottle upright instead of on its side. Vodka cork doesn't seal the way wine cork does, so if it is laid sideways, the spirit will slowly evaporate. And now, number 1. The food that gets better the older it gets. 1. Polish mead, miód pitny. Miód pitny is the food that literally improves with age. This Polish honey wine is fermented from raw honey and water, then aged in oak barrels for years or even decades. It has been brewed in Poland since at least the 10th century, serving for generations as the drink of Polish kings, nobility, and wedding tables. The tradition has its own grammar based on the aging periods and honey-to-water ratios. Poltorak is aged a minimum of 3 years with 1 part honey to a half part water. Dwoźniak is aged 2 years with equal parts honey and water. Trojniak is aged 1 year with 1 part honey to 2 parts water, and Sworniak is aged 9 months with 1 part honey to 3 parts water. The richer the honey ratio, the longer the aging, and the deeper the final flavor. The high sugar of honey combined with the alcohol of fermentation creates an environment hostile to all microorganisms. Sealed in oak or glass, mead doesn't just last, it improves. Documented Polish mead bottles from the 1800s are still being opened and drunk today. Always serve Poltorak at room temperature instead of cold because refrigeration kills the honey aromatics that took years to develop. Those are the 20 foods that have outlasted partitions, wars, occupations, and 1,000 winters of Polish history. Most of them cost almost nothing. All of them are still being preserved in Polish pantries right now, and most could be sitting in yours by the end of the month. Here's the thing. If this opened your eyes about Polish food, you need to see what the Greeks have been doing for 3,000 years. The Greek Stockpile video is the most watched on this channel. Link is on screen and in the description. Go watch it next. Same format, different culture, even older traditions. If you learned something today, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. Subscribe if you want the next pantry. Coming next week. See you there.